so it doesn't vibrate on the thing.
All right. We are going to call this workshop of the Martin County School Board to order. If you would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Ms. Falls, will you please call the roll?
Mr. DiTerlizzi,
Present.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Powers,
Here.
Mrs. Pritchett,
Here.
Mrs. Russell.
Here. Thank you. At this time, we will have open to the public. We do not have any comment cards at this time. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? Seeing none, that will conclude our public comment. We will be moving on to the district presentation of Code of Student Conduct. Dr. Parendozzi, would you like to come forward? Right.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Main, and Martin County community. On behalf of the Department of Student Services, we'd like to first say thank you. Would you mind? Thanks so much. First, we'd like to thank you for reading the extensive information that we sent to you all. I appreciate that, and thank you for hearing our item today. What you did receive is up there. It is the chart of changes in our Code of Student Conduct. In those items, we'll talk about the next steps, kind of where we are currently, and that is where we are today, right? Looking at those amendments, the amendments as needed, what we talked about, what you all spoke about on May 7th, and then where we are this evening. The next step is final board approval after we make some of those amendments. And then what we will be doing after that time is looking at professional learning, everything we need to do with our school-based folks, possibly cross-divisionally, of course, and then our new first day procedures as we roll out some of the changes that we will have on this code of conduct, the ones we already have and anything we may look at from this point forward. Right behind that, we are already looking at school year 25-26, what that will look like, initiating a new process, the form and function of that handbook, the new code of conduct, looking at it in a handbook format, emphasizing some positive behavioral supports on that, and defining additional processes and procedures. So that's what we're doing now, and then what we're already looking at on the next steps. So before we go through this particular side, because this is why we are here today or this evening, I just wanted to point out on the chart of changes, something you are now familiar with. It was introduced to you last time. That's something that I will be doing and incorporating every time I bring something to the board that has to do not only with the code of conduct, but any item that Student Services will bring forward to you, something that will show the changes, what it was before and possibly what it will be in the future to you, any recommendation that will be up for discussion to the board. And we will ask you what to look at and your recommendations on those items. But that chart of changes is slightly different this time around. The grayed areas on that chart are items you have already reviewed and discussed in the previous meeting on May 7th. There is a gold tint to some of the other items. On May 7th, those recommendations that you as a board have made have been addressed and changed now into the new code document. And then there are the remaining still white lines that are from the code that have not yet been addressed previously from the May meeting that ended and us back here today, right? So now we have covered all that from that previous chart of changes that you can look at this evening in addition to what is on the screen at this time. The left side says handbook. Those are discussion items that are available that were brought from the board that are additional discussion items that were some pretty, I think I would call them not just hot topics, but really items for discussion that were additional recommendations that we could amend the current Code of Student Conduct Handbook. To the right, the implementation side of this screen shows items that were also recommendations. However, they do not necessarily change the actual handbook, but are implementation items. So they would go on throughout the school year. And one of those I'd like to point out, it's the second bullet, due process concerns. I'd like to give you an example on that particular item when I speak to implementation. When I speak to implementation, we're talking about due process specifically. I'd like you to know that we did a training. Actually, Chief Rangella did the training for us. He conducted a training just recently with our administrators at our student services training, and it was around investigations and searches, and part of that was a due process discussion. In that due process discussion, we spoke specifically about areas and reminded folks, it was a reminder, as well as part of the processes and procedures around due process. In addition, I have updated the checklist around due process investigations and all of that regarding suspensions, expulsions, and alternative placements. So we are updating processes, procedures, checklists, and all of that is being amended. So we are already taking action on the implementation side of recommendations and items we have heard the board speak to in the previous meeting to this one. So when we speak to implementation, or you all have spoken to implementation, we have taken action. And so we will be taking action on that right side as recommendations that have come from you. So Madam Chair, at this time, Dr. Muto and I are ready to take notes on your discussion items that are on the left. However you would like to take them, we are ready to take notes.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board about any of the items she's discussing on the left? Any questions?
Right.
Would you like to go ahead and present any of the items that you have? You can go ahead and open up with maybe the local community service as an intervention.
Absolutely. So the recommendation was including and incorporating community service as an intervention for students that any infraction that was held, and that could be incorporated at any one of the levels of service for an infraction that a student may occur on one of the disciplinary levels, level 1, 2, or 3. That was a recommendation to include community service as part of that.
Thank you. Roberts?
So when I looked at page 20, because we're talking about it now, I don't necessarily see it on page 20. Is that what we're, right?
Yes.
So you're looking to us, I'm assuming, to see whether that's something that we want implemented into level 1, 2, and 3, so then it would be included? Is that how we're doing this?
If that is the desire of the board to have that included, that was a recommendation.
Right, so just so I understand the process, so each of these things on the board discussion under handbook have not made it into the document yet. Those are things that we need to give you direction on, because, for instance, it's not on the page 20, and it's not on any of
Correct.
these.
They are not included as yet, and they were board discussion items, yes.
Okay, so, so you're looking at, so as a professional, is your recommendation to add that to 1, 2, and 3, or just to add it to 1, knowing that I can always reach backward from 2 and 3, or how would you as a professional recommend that that be handled?
So depending on the infraction, yes, we could include it as 1, and any level thereafter can always incorporates what is in 1.
Okay, so when I'm looking at level 1 and I have, my main things I have there are bus suspension, conflict resolution, lunch detention, mentors, conferences, that type of thing, reteaching rules and behavior. So how would you word that? Community service? Or, would you just say, would you add it to one of these, or would you just?
I think as we look through some of the infractions, I think that would warrant some discussion as to the level of community service, define what that is, and the number, and that would have to be weighted based on the level of infraction. So I think that would warrant some sort of discussion. First of all, it would be a discussion as to whether or not community service is appropriate, and then to what level that would be incorporated at.
And then how would that be monitored if you did do that? If you did do community service, how would you be sure that you know, like, so let's say, you know, Mike does a level 1 infraction of disrespecting other people's property, and your community service is to go do something, right? Pick up trash at a park or something. How, I mean, does that create how does that work? Does that create an issue for us as far as monitoring? I mean,
Well,
how
and that's kind of what the discussion would have to be. That's exactly the same way we have levels of infractions. We would have to talk about what the level of the intervention would be. And then I think we include, not just I think, we include administrators on that, because you have to talk about what is the weight of this monitoring, what is the weight of the level of not just monitoring, but ensuring that it can be practically implemented at all sites. What does that look like? And where is this going to occur when we talk about community service as a whole? So this does not just including it, what does that seem like? What does it feel like? What does it look like? But what is the practical implementation of that? So what is the feel of the board involving this? But then we have to actually look like and take, we have administrators at all 3 levels. What does that look like? Can it actually be done, you know, at an elementary? What are the safety precautions? So we, not only are we asking administrators, but we have to go cross-divisionally as well and vet this through all of our processes and procedures.
So me personally, as much as I like the idea of having community service as something you can do, I struggle with the how you would do that, you know, so I mean, and it's obviously different if you're an 8th grader and I'm a 2nd grader, and we do something and we get, you know, we each get an hour of community service. If I say, well, I want my community service to be at the skateboard park picking up trash, I don't know what liability we have that we have a student that is picking up trash at a skateboard park, whereas, I mean, obviously that probably isn't appropriate for a 2nd grader to do. For an 8th grader, then how does that even get documented? How do you even?
Doesn't the sheriff's office monitor and manage some of that, like community service stuff, or is it,
Well, we require community service now.
no, who monitors it?
How does it get monitored for
Well, you
students?
get students, if you're required to do it, wherever you do your community service, someone has to sign off on it. So you just can't say, oh, I'm going to go to the beach and do a beach cleanup for an hour. You have to go to a program that accepts students to complete service hours. So whether it's the Humane Society, if you want to go and clean cages, and that's community service. But someone there has to sign off that you did that for an hour, or whatever
So where are we requiring community service now?
well, it's required for Bright Futures and in high school.
For volunteer.
So-
Volunteer
volunteer.
hours, so you're being
But
volunteer.
I consider that community service as well. They're volunteering to do it in lieu of, you know, not getting their scholarship. They're volunteering to do something good in the community in lieu of a more serious punishment, and if they don't complete it, then they come back.
And we could have a list of community partners that we use on a regular basis, that they know the drill, they know what we're looking for.
I think it's going to be harder in elementary school, obviously.
Much so.
A lot of places won't take young children, you know, to do volunteer hours or whatever. So I think that's going to be an issue, and maybe that's an internal thing. Maybe it is, like, you're going to have to miss recess, and you have to come in and help wipe down tables after lunch, or I don't know, like little tasks like that they can do within the school, and they're going to be supervised. If that's something that we want to do in elementary, but I think it will be more difficult the younger the children are.
So would I capture that by saying a community service opportunity in lieu of, and that they could alternately perform some sort of community service, and we can talk, and we can hold a focus group on that with administrators cross-divisionally, talk about some of the safety aspects, talk about some of the monitoring, because we will have to weigh that out with everyone, get some of that information around elementary versus secondary, talk about, as you say, how will the monitoring occur, how will all of those things, I've taken notes on some of those aspects of the what-ifs, and then if this, then what, and take a look at that elementary versus secondary. We know it would look differently, absolutely, and look at those things. So if I've captured that correctly, is there anything else on that item?
Can you double dip? I mean, so if I'm in high school and I'm doing my volunteer hours to, so how do we keep track of that?
Separate times,
And they would be a different form.
Yeah.
different forms.
Okay, because we process the volunteer hours for Bright Futures? Do we, Marcia, did?
Yeah, we just turn them, the kids just turn in the form to their guidance counselor.
It's- It is.
Okay, so you'd have to check with the guidance counselor to be sure that it's not the, yeah, if it can happen.
Madam Chair, I have also seen it at the elementary level where there's like a Saturday school, behavioral Saturday school, and there's a staff member that agrees to work on a Saturday and come in, and they do work details around the school on a Saturday so that it's not impacting the school day, and it's an added disciplinary measure that the parent is also being held responsible to bring the child on a Saturday. If they do not complete it on a Saturday, then the alternative becomes out-of-school suspension. So they're given, options to say if the parent does not get them there, then this is what you're getting in lieu of as well. So it's an option.
Well, and I think it should be an option in lieu of, depending on the infraction, in lieu of, but it could be in addition to, depending on the infraction. So if you could get a day suspension, and in order to not get your second one, you have to do community service hours. So it could be not just in lieu of, but in addition to, depending on their infraction. So could be a suite of things that they get on level one.
So level one, it's secondary that has the Saturday detention, but we have detention before and after school. So is there a way to make that part of detention? That instead of detention of you just sitting in a room, that it's
As part of that.
work detail or something?
Same way Mr. Main had referred to the
Yes.
Saturday school, making it part of that as a detail?
That, that detention can be with or without, I don't know what you would call it.
Well, I think
work
on-
detail.
Even in secondary, the Saturday school is they're not like sitting in a room doing nothing. They're typically after a Friday night football game at the stadium picking up trash. They're doing things on the campus. I just know that, not from my personal experience, but, I may have had a child that had to do that. But they do things around the campus. They're not just sitting in a classroom doing homework.
So did we want to add the ability to do Saturday to elementary, just in case it was some, because right now, the chart doesn't give us Saturday for a level one for elementary, but if you had an elementary, obviously you'd work it out with your staff, but if I was the principal at J.D. Parker and I was going to be there anyway, or there was something happening on Saturday, I don't have the ability with this list of consequences for level one, I don't have the ability to use that Saturday piece as a level one consequence because it's not in the chart. But if the intention is like Mr. Main is saying that, no, you can come in and you can, clean windows, sweep, or, whatever the thing is, that maybe we should include the ability.
Okay.
And if we're already adding that piece to the detention piece, if that's already happening, like Mrs. Powers is saying, where they're not just sitting in a room, they're actually doing something, then I think that maybe then that's just a training issue so that all the schools know that they have the ability
To implement
to
something.
do that, that they have the ability so that it's not, because I would like to see that kind of universal across the district so that in your school, if your principal's idea of detention is you sit in a seat, but in your school, your principal's idea of detention is trash on the football field, I think that we need to know that.
Well, and I think we should have some approved activities that can happen during that time. So it might be, not be that everyone on that day is going to be able to pick up trash, but you just have a suite of approved activities that can happen during that detention time or whatever we call it, Saturday school time. These are the things that can happen, and you get to pick, because you don't want to, I don't want to pigeonhole them into saying, well, you have to go outside, it might be raining that day. So there just needs to be options, or the person that is the teacher that's assigned that day can't be exposed to the sun for what, I don't know. There's like so many things, but we need to give them options, I think. And these are the approved things that you can do.
Right. On a list of allowable.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific.
Comments in reference to the community service? Are there any other questions about the handbook, any of the options that are on the left-hand side?
So all of these are things that aren't in here unless we discuss them, correct?
Yes.
So your notice page for clarifying and detailing information, that's the one with your little infographic pieces, correct?
It is, and I'll share with you some of the recommendations that were made, if that's okay, if I could take just a moment.
Absolutely.
Under vaping specifically, it was not just banning vaping, it was banning vaping and possession of vape products. That was recommended to be added to be a little more clear as not just vaping in and of itself. And then under the area of cell phones, it would be inclusive of cell phones and smartwatches, inclusive of both of those, and making it very clear with not just the icon of the cell phone, but the cell phone and a smartwatch, so that students knew that we were not just talking about one device, one wireless device, but making it clear that this was a notice of events that we were going to look at all of these. And those were some of the additional recommendations, just to be a little more clear, that putting families and students on notice.
So even though you have that on page 3, if we need to indicate, I am interested in having it on page 3 with that higher level of detail, so I
Yes,
don't
we
know.
would update this particular flyer.
Well, and I think we need to be, because I know we talked briefly about, so I had the 3 priorities, which were bullying, vaping, and attendance. Oh, and cell phones, sorry. 4 things. So we need to be extremely clear when we push this out over the summer in the marketing campaign, like, okay, you have your cell phone out during the day. I don't know if you all read the article from Orange County. One of the schools, they talked about, they went to a no cell phone policy.
Yeah.
And the results were really good. The kids were engaged. They set up, like, during lunch times, they set up, like pickleball in the hall. They had like a DJ out one day. They could DJ themselves within reason, obviously. So they had like fun things that they could do to distract them. And they got a lot of really positive feedback from the kids. Some of them were like, oh, but we would like to have our cell phone out at lunch. And oh, when we're walking to and from class. And, it's like, yeah, no. I don't think that we want to go there. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it. I think it's yes or no. You can have it in your backpack, but you may not have it on and be using it during the school day. So I was really pleased that it was so positive. But I would just want to be really clear when we do our campaign, so parents know what the expectations are from when they get caught. This is what is going to happen, so the parents know too. No surprises when they have to take off work to come in.
Question. for
And I
you
kind
then.
of feel like if that can be somehow incorporated, so you have I would be interested in adding attendance to that, special attention this year. We have A, B, C, and V. A is attendance. You can't learn unless you show up. This is what everybody expects you to come in for the day. I mean, that's what it is. B is bullying, that there's a stronger stand on, that we've always been against bullying, but, you need to know that there's higher, whatever the piece is. C is cell phones including smartwatches. And they need to be put away, not be seen, turned off and put away. If they come out a parent's going to have to come back and pick it up at a different time. And so you can tell right off the bat, if you're saying attention, parents, students, and staff, so that if you're the parent, if you don't get past page 3, it's not just, oh, yeah, you have to have it turned off. It becomes if you don't turn it off, I have to drive to the school. So it becomes that. And then the vaping, I think it needs to say that, it's the vaping and anything that has to do with vaping. It's not just the physical act of vaping, it's possession. It doesn't matter if it's tobacco, not tobacco, it's devices, it's all those things. All those things we don't want, they have no place in a school setting. And here's the consequence for
Or
doing
in your
that.
car.
Yeah. But I
on
mean,
our
I think
campus.
if you can do it somehow where this is what it is, 4-word sentence, and then this is a consequence, just so you can kind of clearly see, this is what's going to happen. I mean, this is, you're going to be driving in your car to come pick up your kid's phone because they took it out and did something, or, but yeah.
And they're not going to be able to tell them till they get home because they won't have
Because they
their
don't
cell
have a phone to call 'em,
So
yeah.
they're going to have to come back the next day,
Yeah.
in theory. Probably won't happen that way, but.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment, is to know that, if you take your phone out at 2:00 in the afternoon on Friday, if the pickup time is from 3 to 4, if you didn't make it between 3 and 4 on Friday, your next time to come back is Monday, unless Monday's a holiday, and then it's gonna be Tuesday, and it's just the reality of life that, you made an unfortunate decision to whip your phone out, and yeah, that's where it's gonna be,
Correct.
But I think I think if you're very forward-facing and very upfront as to, Mike, if you plan on taking your phone out, you might want to take it out on a Tuesday so you can get it back on a Wednesday, and not on a Friday when Monday's a holiday, because it's going to be, think Thanksgiving, you're going to lose your phone for a long time.
I don't think I'm going to school this week.
Yeah, you might be, you might not be. Yeah. But, okay, so that's that one.
And that pretty much, that also addresses the very last bullet as well, those clear and concise consequences for infractions for vaping and for cell phones. So you guys covered actually 2 of those in that
Yeah.
one. Thank you.
Agreed. But I think if you have it, I think the more forward you can be with it, and the messaging that goes out over the summertime, so that parents aren't surprised when their child loses their cell phone for the holidays,
Thank
or
you.
spring break, or whatever the.
Thank you for both of those.
Ms. Pritchett, you?
Is there any value to using the word zero tolerance?
So that was included, that is included actually in the overview on the very top of that. It does exist there currently. There's been mixed feedback on the zero tolerance. So if you would like to discuss that, it does exist currently in the overview. But we can discuss that if you'd like.
And because that's what you're saying. You're saying you take out your phone, there's going to be an issue. It's we're not going to put up with it. So to me, that translates to zero tolerance. But I don't know if.
Well, when I think of zero tolerance, I think of you're out. Like, it's sort of like the 3 strikes you're out thing. I don't know if we want to do that, because it gets progressively worse. So the first time, it's like, okay, you get caught, we're going to inconvenience your parents, and they're going to have to come get it, and they're going to have to sit and talk to an administrator, and the students should have to be there as well. And they're going to have to talk to someone and hopefully get buy-in from the parent in the first time, and it won't happen again. But the second time it happens, what is that? And that, we talked about this when I met with the team, is what are those consequences? Like, we have got to do things that they care about. So, like being able to drive to park on campus, being able to participate in athletics, being able to participate in after-school club activities, things that are important to them, because when you say, oh, I'm going to give you in-school suspension, it's like, meh, I can do my work. I'm like,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't really impact them. So we need to think about how we want those
And I think,
consequences.
and I think the message for cell phones should be, if you want to try this system, the minimum thing that's going to happen if you take your phone out is, it's going to be taken away from you, and your parent can come the next day between these hours to come pick up your phone. And I would think procedurally, when you come the next day, the next school day, you can come and pick up your phone. You lose your phone on that day, next school day, you can come between those hours to come get your phone. When you come to get your phone between those hours, I would think, here, you need to sign a piece of paper that you realize that this was the first time that you did this, and this is what happened. But if it happens again, it might be a little bit stricter on you. Not only are you going to do this, but your ability to drive onto campus may be taken away from you. Your ability to go to prom may be taken, I mean, here's other things that might happen to you because of this. Not just you're going to do it again, so it's not, yeah, you've learned how to live without your phone for 24 hours. Quite frankly, I think that when they use their phone for 24 hours, I think it's a huge wake-up call. I would think that most people, if you took their phone away for 24 hours, they would just be like in a complete panic. But I think you need to be really upfront and say that this is what it looks like. This is your minimum thing that's going to happen to you. This is the minimum thing that's going to happen if you have a vape device or anything with you. And so up front, this is what's.
So we will both, I took notes on all of that. Actually, we are both, so that we cover everything for you as well. But also wanted to take note that on page 20, in level 1, the withdrawal of privileges is there and available currently to administrators. So that does exist currently in our intervention section. So it does exist. It's not something that we have to add at this time.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear and consistent, because I don't want a student who gets caught with their cell phone or even vaping at one school I want the punishment, obviously, depending on what the activity is. I mean, if it's prom, it's going to escalate, like, okay, you're not going to be able to go to participate in after-school activities or drive on campus. I mean, driving and like prom, homecoming, those are like, I think, next level. Sports is, hey, you may just have to miss sports. I think that's like almost the second level. Sports, after-school activities, clubs, anything like that, it should be like the second level. And then the big ones for high school, obviously, because that's where our biggest problem is. I mean, vaping is happening in middle schools too, unfortunately. Yeah, homecoming, prom, driving, parking. I'm trying to think of other things that seniors get to do.
While you're thinking of all those things, so what kind of time frame do you suggest we give those penalties? You're going to take away sports for the year, for the
Well,
semester?
that's what, yeah.
That's a big punishment, taking it away for the year.
No, I don't think it's for a year. I think that it's,
Your next game.
I would listen to a recommendation that to show the progressive nature of the punishment,
Yeah.
like,
One game, then it's
yeah,
maybe
it's just,
1 week.
But I
you have to
agree
be
with
careful
Mrs.
because not
Powers.
everybody is in a club or on a sports
Right.
team. So we have to have those options that are kind of equivalent at that second as you progress through, that are equivalent to, for students that aren't in a club or aren't on a sports team. Like what would that look like?
So at the FSBA thing, I was talking to some other school board members who had dealt with this, and they said that the biggest challenge is the staff training, so that you don't have one teacher that says, okay, it's okay in my class that that you take it out. It's okay. And then you've got, well, now I've got the cool teacher that everybody likes, putting pressure on the other ones. Or you have one school that this is the punishment, that if it's, you have to come pick up your phone between 3 and 4, but this other school here, this nice friendly school, they let you come anytime you want to pick up your phone. They don't care about this 3 to 4. That was just a suggestion in their mind. And so then that pits one school against another school and then you get the parade of people coming in saying, well, why is this school doing it one way and this school doing it another way? That Amy took out her phone at Martin County High School, and I took out mine at Jensen Beach the day before spring break, and Amy's without her phone for spring break, and my mother got to come and pick it up at the end of the school day when she picked me up, and I got my phone for spring break.
Well, and I tend to agree with you there, and I would kind of want to be a little contrarian on this whole thing of keeping it for some period of time, because they're punished for doing something at school, and we shouldn't be punishing them for something that happens after school or on a weekend. And to keep their cell phone, which is their family's private property, you may get a whole bunch of backlash from parents.
But so,
Granted, they shouldn't violate the rules, but at the end of the day, maybe the parent should have to come inside and get the cell phone.
well, I think they should, but I mean, what do you do if you lose a cell phone at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on a Friday afternoon?
And
The
if
parent should be contacted at that point and
Parents
say,
should be
we
contacted,
just took
say,
your
you
child's
need to
Just
come
phone.
in
took
and
your
get your-
child's cell phone, and
Please
you
come
need to
pick it
know
up
the
by 4
pickup
o'clock.
time is between 3 and 4. Yeah, which is
The
fine.
parents gonna have to deal with it. I mean, yeah. But for us to
Which I
keep it
think
all
is fine.
weekend,
No,
you know,
but
if
I
that
mean,
parent sends
but I
their
think
kid
what's gonna-
somewhere,
But I
right.
think what's gonna happen is if they miss the pickup,
then they're
that's
gonna-
the reality
That's
of
not on
life.
us,
Then that's
Lee.
not on us,
I
that's
know,
on the
that
parent.
isn't, I know.
Right.
But I mean, I think
That's
that
fine.
needs to be a consistent message of the,
If they get the message across to them in the beginning and they
Yes.
don't take out their phone, they won't have to worry about it. So that's what I meant about zero tolerance, is like, we are no longer allowing students to use the phone during the school day. They have to be in their backpacks. If they decide to take them out, the parents are going to be called. They need to pick it up by the end of the day. If they can't come by the end of the day, then they're going to have to wait till the next day. That's all. I mean, that's what I kind of mean. Like, there's no more like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. I know you're working till 5. Well, if the parents notify their children, don't do this in school, maybe that will be where we get our best.
I
kind
know,
of
and I know lots of parents
tightening.
that will be happy
Yes.
if their child didn't have their cell phone. I mean, there are going to be some that are going to complain, I know that. But a lot of parents would be happy if their child didn't have the cell phone for a weekend, and some won't be.
and I think from an administration standpoint, you got to figure out whether, do I want them to pick it up during half an hour before school is over to an hour after school is over? I mean, what's the time slot? Or do you want this revolving door of people coming in, picking up cell phones all day long? I mean, it's,
It has to be at the end of the day.
yeah,
Has to be, when school is, after school is dismissed.
yeah.
How late, what are the hours of the offices
After school.
after school? Like, are they there till 4? Are they there till 4:30?
Well, it varies based on whether it's elementary, middle, or high, but I do think that whatever we decide, we need to be consistent with the after-school, and the school principal and the admin secretary need to set that time frame. So 20 minutes after school ends, 15 minutes after school ends, something like that, so that we're not bombarding the front offices. They're all throughout the
Making
day.
them stay, I mean, we're not going to do that. We want it to coincide with the end of their workday.
Yes, and typically, it would probably be the dean's secretary, the assistant, the principal, student services secretary that would be managing the initial intake of those parents, and then the AP setting up those meetings with the AP to be able to meet with the parents to have the discussion.
Yeah, and I do think it needs to be, you can't just drive up, beep your horn, and somebody run out with the phone. I think that's kind of a, yeah. But I mean, but that's the thing that I think you go back to, I want it to be the same at every school. I don't want one school to be the friendly, we got the drive-through window, so just come over, beep, and we'll hand your phone out the window, and the other one being the,
Take this home and have your parents sign it and bring it back.
Yeah,
And I'll
right.
give you your phone.
yeah.
You're seeking a pickup and a conference, basically. Is that the idea?
I think so, yes.
And it could be a 3-minute conference,
But
but
it needs,
certainly.
but it needs to be a
needs to be-
face-to-face.
That way, it stands out more in their mind.
And they sign that they picked it up, and they
Yeah,
say,
parent signs that they picked it up, student, I mean, everybody signs the piece of paper, and then we know that the phone,
And regarding the item of each school has to be identical, is the treatment has to be this. We had this conversation. you know, it is so important that we get out there and educate staff, administration, and everybody that this is the way it's gonna be, and this is so that we could be successful in the task we're required to do, which is educate your students, your children. So if you want us to be successful, we have to take all those distractions away, and each school has to abide by those. Each teacher, each, you know, administrator, or staff worker, or whatever, has to abide by the same rules and not interpret them differently. They have to be basic and simple so they understand it.
And that the intent of the board is to support instructional time.
Without a doubt, yes.
When you move on to the expectations, emphasize 3 priority areas, page 8. My page 8, I don't think is the page 8 you're talking about.
If you take a look, I think it was, take a look at.
My page 8 is the end of the
It's
chapter 1
really-
overview.
Well, it's 9. If you take a look at 9, go to, it's chapter 2 technically. And student and essential partner expectations. There's a list of expectations for students, and then the
Page 10
next.
electronically, page 9 on the, electronically, not 10.
9.
9 at the bottom of the page, yes.
It's 9 at the printed document.
That's it,
It
you got
is.
it, you got it right there. Sorry.
So there's a chart that speaks to student, and it says partners. And the next is parent, and it speaks to what are our expectations. It allows the students to have an understanding of their expectations stated in a positive manner, and then it gives them examples, so to speak. And what we want to do is increase. There's 5 different examples for bullying: to be kind, use kind words, things in writing, right? But we don't have anything currently for the vaping or for the cell phone. So we'd like, adding something around digital citizenship would benefit to go ahead and reinforce the 3, I'm calling them our 3 priority areas that go around vaping, cell phone, and bullying. Bullying is heavily noted here, but we would have to include vaping and cell phone to do that in this particular area. That's just something that came across as a common thread in the need from the board. And it reinforces
And I
everything
agree
else
with
that the
that.
board had said to us.
And I agree with that, because as you sit there and point to it, as you have somebody who committed one of those actions, and now you're pointing to the code of conduct, I think it gives you some ability to, or even for a parent, to say, well, if you look at the expectations, these are our expectations, and it's printed, you know, it's all over the document. It was on page 3. If you missed it on page 3, you might have picked it up under student and parent expectations. You know, so here's our expectations, so you kind of know upfront what that looks like. So I think it should be there.
Here's
Just
what
remember-
it is positively, and here's
Yes.
what it's not, right? Yes.
Yeah, and everything you have there is stated in a positive manner instead of in a,
So this is, am I missing something? I thought we were going to reduce the size of this document.
We are reducing the
Because this
size
is,
of the
this is
document,
107
sir.
pages.
It's just inclusive right now because it still has the strike-throughs.
Still has
It
the
still
strike-throughs,
has
okay.
everything included in it for your review. Once that is, this process is approved, all of those things will be removed.
Thank you. Just as you said.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely.
and I don't think that follow the student network and internet responsible use and safety agreement has anything to do with the cell phone piece. I think that has to do with how well we protect our systems and our equipment.
So did go ahead and find out additional information. It's not just the protection of just our equipment, it's really the access and how students use, and it's accessing the internet, our local internet. So we can't always say from student use. We can update that, and we can update it to include wireless devices, because I asked, can we include all of our devices, right? And student devices as they utilize our internet, and that can be done. However, if they're utilizing their student device on their own wireless internet, we don't have control over that. But we can update the form to allow it to include their wireless devices accessing our internet. So it's not just protection of our devices and hardware, but it's their acceptable use of our internet.
Right, but my point being that follow the student network and internet responsible use and safety agreement, which in other words means use technology as instructed,
Yes.
doesn't take into account Mike using his smart watch with his cell phone using G's.
It does not.
Isn't what?
G's.
Usually
Because I think that whole piece is an ET piece and was written by ET and not written to deal with the, you know what G's are?
Like 5G, 4G.
This, the
Yeah.
G's, not the Wi-Fi, the G's.
I don't think G's are up there, but
Oh, there is one G up there.
It's from the, it's from the
Cell phone
tower.
towers?
Yeah, it's from the
Yes.
towers, the G's.
We know where she's
cell
going.
phone service, you mean?
Yeah, that, yeah.
So understanding that, where you're pointing, that is accurate, and we can't control that because that is the student using their device.
Which is fine, so I don't really, so yes, we can control the student using their device by making it a level 2 offense to take your cell phone out.
Correct,
Correct.
but on this acceptable use.
Yeah, so that piece,
Form,
that's
we
just a thing.
cannot, right, we can't
That's
do it
just
on
making
that
the
form.
ET people happy.
Correct, we can't
Yes.
do it on that form, but we can do it within our policy. Yes, I just wanted to make that
Yes.
clear on that particular form.
Right,
Yes, we are speaking the same language.
Okay, and as you roll out the implementation, I believe that when the push has been recently to try to make all these things electronic, so that when parents are doing their beginning of the school year registration thing, they're signing all the electronic things.
Yes.
Is there a way that when, I guess they sign something electronic that says they've read and seen the student code of conduct, correct?
Yes, it's currently done electronically.
So is there a way in that document also to say, besides I've seen the student code of conduct, to kind of highlight the 3 or 4 things that are the big things, like this?
Like have them sign off
Have
on
them
this.
initial
So-
those pages.
So that form is in the back. We did speak about incorporating the 3 priority areas into that acknowledgement form. That's the second bullet from the bottom, is including those 3 priority into that form, acknowledgement form in the back page. So we want to highlight it there as well. So when they sign that, they've also signed that these 3 priority areas are in that form. So we want to include that language there. So you've brought that topic, and it is there as one of the discussion items. Absolutely, we'd like to see it there. If it's going to be that, if this is our priority area, then we want to carry it through every item that we discuss with families and parents, and that entire campaign from when we start it now, through social, through all of our avenues of the parent link, the calls home to families, posters, newsletters, whatever, wherever we communicate to families, or Mr. Main communicates to families, it is something that is that priority, right? So we want to continue to do that throughout. And that is one of the ways in which it is there. So you've hit another bullet item on that, on our list of discussions.
Oh, okay, I see. Oh, I did, okay.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
So did we want this to be 3 things, or did we want to add attendance to it? Do we want ABCV, or do we just want BCV?
I think attendance needs to be addressed too.
I think ABCV, so I think if you add attendance,
Or D, don't vape.
just, yeah.
Continue it down. I think that needs to be included. That's a problem right now.
It's never a problem.
Yeah, so if you, an issue. So if you put that on the page 3 also, and you also, I think it's page 3 and on the page at the back, the form thing.
You can call it the ABCs of good behavior.
And you're adding it on the page 9 or the page, whatever the page number comes out to be for the expectations, right?
And we just have the tobacco separate paraphernalia sentence on page 28.
It is. It's a sentence that to separate that out and make it its own actual sentence and infraction so that it is separate from the other item. It was felt as though when you take out the actual paraphernalia from the item, it's no longer tobacco, it is just the actual device in and of itself. It's a vaping device in and of itself with nothing in it. It is still a violation, but it's not necessarily a tobacco violation, which can increase either the tobacco infraction numbers, right, and distort possibly those, or it's not actually falling in under tobacco. So taking it out makes it a separate violation or an infraction. And so that was the recommendation, was just separating it out. It's still an infraction. It still is a violation that would be addressed with an intervention, but it's just a separate one and not inclusive under the tobacco in and of itself.
Everyone okay with that?
Yeah, so the same way in level 3, so that would correct the definition, because right now,
Yes.
even though we're saying that TBC definition is tobacco, we have altered the TBC definition by adding a sentence to it.
Yes, it was not in there before. I think it was placed in there at some point in time. Now
Right.
it's just removing it and keeping it as its own
And so
separate
then the
item.
same way we have the off-campus felony that doesn't have a state definition, and we have the technology infraction major that doesn't have a state definition, we would have a vaping paraphernalia and,
Paraphernalia, correct.
well, it would be paraphernalia and the actual vaping. So if you vape something that's not tobacco, it's just, so I think the reason that this was put there, that sentence was added, was well, we don't care if you're vaping tobacco or what you're vaping. It was just the act of vaping, and it was, I think, as a convenience to stick it into the tobacco piece. But if you leave the tobacco piece alone, because I think what happens is, and I think we discussed this, so if the way this is defined now, by all vaping being in the tobacco thing, it would make our statistics that we're giving Cesar look horrible for tobacco, because we've included all vaping things in the tobacco piece, right?
Well, if they're vaping tobacco, that's
Well,
where
if they're vaping in tobacco, that's where it goes, but if they're not vaping tobacco, or if they have a vape device, and we're including it at this point under a tobacco reporting thing, it makes it look, that number should look
Why would we
huge.
report it under tobacco?
Because we've changed the definition of tobacco in here.
But Cesar is defined, we don't make up those definitions.
That's currently where it sits.
Because if it's a Cesar violation and so we don't make those up.
Correct, but we did. But we're fixing it now.
We addressed everything on the handbook side. Where would you like to go from here?
Yes, you have. The only thing I'd like to address is really take a look, if you'd like to just take a look at the items on the implementation side. And I think actually some of our board members have mentioned it a couple of times this evening, and that is discipline consistently applied across all schools. That is a concern. You guys have mentioned that a couple of times, that you would like to see that happen. That can be implemented and reinforced, actually reinforced throughout the system by our leadership and in our trainings. We have said that and spoken to that. Due process, I've addressed that. An attendance campaign is happening. That actually was something that Mr. Main spoke to very early, the first time we met, as a matter of fact. So that is something very high on his radar and has been. The Student Code of Conduct is going to look in the form and function of that starting the following year. As soon as we put closure on this one, we are starting to look at that as a handbook, right? An item, the function of it to actually be a handbook for all end users to know where things are, what to do, and how to actually look at those processes and how to utilize that handbook for all of its functions. And then the appeals committee to continue from a student support services perspective. Let's keep it focused around students and that philosophy of what we are here for is to work with and for students. And so that we keep that whole appeals process in the mindset of student services. And so those were all discussion items, but they were discussion items that are on the implementation side and what we will do actually now and in the future. Take a look at all of those items. We will keep those in the forefront as we continue to plan and modify processes and procedures in our department, in our office, and actually cross-divisionally as needed. So that was just something that we wanted to let you guys know we were thinking about, what we will be doing with all of those, and the other items were really up for discussion to make amendments to the current document. So thank you very much for all of your input. We have our notes, and we are through unless there's something additional.
I had one more comment. On page 30, you have the tobacco vaping infraction decision tree.
Yes.
And when the student is caught in possession of a vape device or is caught in the use, caught isn't a very positive word, but I guess in this case, we're using that one. It appears that it only is taking into account that if it's tobacco or if it's THC. So if there's the possibility that you would have a vaping device that's not tobacco or not THC, I think your decision tree should have another piece to it that shows what happens if you're, does that make?
It does, and so that would be inclusive. That was recommended, and a third, we would have to amend the document. That document was board approved, so we would have to bring that back through. Once this discussion item has been approved this evening, any of those, including the one that's separating out the tobacco and the paraphernalia, that infraction, any intervention that applies there would allow us to put a third column on that to take us through that process, right? So then we would be able to add that, have to amend that form and bring that form back through. So yes, it would have to be amended.
So the form, this decision tree, the only place we've approved it is in the Code of Conduct. We've
No.
never.
No,
we've-
that,
We've approved a decision tree as a separate document? When did we do that?
Dr. Estevez? Good evening, board members, and Superintendent Main. I believe that that decision tree had came forward under, I guess, 2 directors ago. It was brought forward separately outside of the Code of Conduct. You can look on board docs and see. When I had looked and found it, I think I saw it as a separate item.
As an action item at a board meeting? Would we have had a?
We will check.
Because I think it's embedded in the Code of Conduct. I mean, I think it would be.
Yeah, clearly it's in the Student Code of Conduct. If it came through as a separate board item, we could do that research very quickly. If it was, then for whatever reason, it was brought forward at that time as a separate item. If it wasn't, it's the pleasure of the board, we'll just go ahead and get it updated, and then it'll get approved when we approve the Student Code of Conduct as a whole.
Yes.
Marcia, do you remember that?
It's possible that Dr. Muto might have a little bit more information because she had worked side by side with the previous director during that time.
Good evening. It was brought forward last year during the last Code of Conduct workshop when we went over the tobacco prevention program. And this document was also shared in a presentation, but it was during a workshop.
Okay, so if it was at a workshop,
At a
it may
workshop, there
not
was no
have been
action.
approved, but
There's no
you all
action,
might
right.
have given consensus around.
Put it into the.
around the
Code of
document
Conduct.
being placed, and maybe based on what was currently in it, you were good, so they moved forward and placed it in the Student Code of Conduct. So I believe we have the clarification that we need. So in this case, my direction to you, Dr. Parendozzi, would be to go ahead and make the changes per the board's discussion or direction, and then it'll just be brought forward as a Student Code of Conduct for approval.
thank you.
Ms. Pritchett?
At the risk of sounding unintelligent, what else would be in a vape pen besides THC or tobacco? What product are you talking about? Because I don't know what else would go in there. if it doesn't have tobacco and it doesn't have THC, what other product would be in there? Nothing?
It could be nothing, yeah.
Don't they have like flavored
Or they could be peppermint, or it could
glycol
be.
or
But they're
antifreeze
peppermint
or
of
something like that?
nicotine or THC. It's not a separate type of drug, is it?
Well, do they smoke that stuff you can buy at convenience stores, you know, those?
Because they have this,
I mean, kids are dying of that.
it's like
I'm
an
just
ethyl
saying, kids are dying from
glycol,
Bath salts.
some kind of
Well, it's like a,
product that's flavored strawberry and raspberries and
I just
Great.
didn't know there were other things that could go in there.
Either way, it
remember.
covers our bases.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
I can't remember the name of that thing, that stuff that they buy.
let me look it up.
Thank you, I really appreciate this. I think it looks good, and I appreciate all the time and consideration you took with it.
Thank you very much.
One-pager. It's great. The one-pager.
Oh, terrific. Thank you very much.
I think we're all very pleased with what you've done in such a short amount of time. Very impressive, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the time that you all have put into it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Board members, you can put nicotine, which is extracted from tobacco, propylene glycol, and flavorings and other chemicals have been in e-cigarettes and things that are claimed to be nicotine-free, but there's all kinds of different things that go in there.
Yeah, based on my lunch with the Indian Town kids, you can pretty much do anything in them. Doesn't need to be
Absolutely.
tobacco or THC. I mean, and so based on that information, it could be something innocent that they're just, it's peppermint, and they're just learning how to use the device so that when they learn how to smoke, they'll be able to add tobacco to it, but I pointed out
Do you
it's
put
still.
liquid? I don't even know how a vape works. I honestly do not even know.
I
Like,
found
is
out
it
that some of
liquid,
them
they're
you
cartridges?
charge them. Some of them
Yeah, I
you
did
hook
know
up to
that.
your cell phone and you charge it.
Yeah, I did know that, but I didn't know if it was like something liquid. It's not like a pipe that you pack stuff in, or, like. No.
All right. Do we have any other questions or discussions that we'd like to speak of tonight? Okay. Well, this workshop is now adjourned.